Hey everyone, Insanity here, and we completed all the Twisted Metal 4 playthroughs, so it's time for a fourth thoughts video. If we go by release order and behind the scenes information concerning the game development cycle, it's clear that Twisted Metal 4 was made to right the wrongs of Twisted Metal 3 and make heavy improvements upon it. For the most part, I'd say it's definitely a huge improvement, though there are still some questionable choices made by developers. Some of it is nitpicks mainly, but there are also some big flaws. Naturally, let's start with a little history lesson. Twisted Metal 4 was literally the fourth game I got for Twisted Metal series, after having gotten 2, Black, and 3 in that order. My primary exposure to the game prior to actually getting it was through information on GameFAQs and GameSpot, and I've seen some images of the game, but I've never seen any actual gameplay footage of 4, unlike 3. I was particularly engrossed with this one guide created for Super Dumper on GameFAQs, which did a lot of heavy lifting in attracting my interest to the game. Then, my sister would one Christmas Day gift me a copy of the game as a present, and that's when I finally would get into Twisted Metal 4 proper. Unlike Twisted Metal 3, I never started off my initial playthrough of the game by abusing cheat codes. In fact, I don't feel like I ran the TM4 codes in my gaming notebook the same way I did for TM3, so I played the game legitimately from the very beginning. Despite having played Twisted Metal Black before, I was dissatisfied with certain things in that game, like the heavily nerfed freezes. The Super Dumper guide made me think, whoa, longer freeze states, super long combos, loads of energy moves, lots of weapons, sign me up. Twisted Metal 4 immediately got my attention when the main menu was blasting the short instrumental loop of 1 minute silences, a more violent approach, so I felt I was in for a good time. I definitely enjoyed the game, at least more so than Twisted Metal 3 from the very beginning, though having come back and played it to its entirety, plus having done speedruns of the game, there are some things I have cooled on since then. Luckily, Pedro's Twisted Metal 4 mods and some other mods of 4 have really helped give it the juice that the vanilla version lacks to make it far more fun. So, some of the things that I have an issue with in this game. I think the first one is messing with the control scheme. The classic TM controls are a classic for a reason. In 4, this is the first game where double tapping the gas button initiates turbo. While you can also customize the controls like you could in Twisted Metal 3 and set turbo to activate on a single press of a button, the turbo will still activate even when double tapping in reverse. And any button you set to gas or reverse will initiate turbo on double tap. By default, the gas button is X. It would have been fine somewhat if it were like Twisted Metal Black, where only double tapping the designated gas button does turbo, while gas on anywhere else like up on a D-pad didn't do that. On a D-pad, the up button is set to no function, presumably to avoid something like this, especially given how you have to double tap up as part of the key inputs for some energy moves. Still, if they had to do a double tap for turbo at all, then Black's control scheme was the way it should have been done. I still prefer turbo being a single press, and that has not really been the case since Black onwards. While the other controls that I'm not used to, like X for gas, can be reconfigured, nonetheless I'd still prefer square for gas and X for tight turn, as has been the case in all the other TMs, and preferred that they didn't change that at all. I'm assuming that 4's control scheme was intended to take on something more akin to racing games controls, given how X is used to accelerate, and 989 Studios did make Rallycross, which is a racing game. Still, don't mess with the control scheme so drastically, even the control customization is a thing. Secondly, the AI still have the annoying ability to snap off the tracking from a homing weapon. They can still read your movement inputs like in TM3, but unlike 3 where you can manipulate their movements by deliberately choosing to stay still or move slowly to control the AI, the AI in 4 are less guided by your movement inputs and still retain some independence in their movement. All it takes is orbital or microblast making one small turn to the right when targeted by a homing weapon, and now cause the homing missile or freeze missile to curve around their vehicle wanted style. I don't know what kind of variables that 989 used to create the tracking system for homing weapons in their TM games, but I'm sure most homing weapons don't behave like they're on a string and that a small tugging of the string is enough to throw it off course. It's all the more frustrating that they made weapons with unparalleled homing capabilities like Sweet Tooth Special, So they clearly know how to make tracking abilities for homing weapons. All they need to do is to make it that the AI can't dodge them by turning at the last second. They need to move more erratically or in an unpredictable way beforehand for them to dodge it properly. The ideal homing weapon is closer to something like Twisted Metal 1 and 2's homing missiles. Those are perfect, having very good homing ability that is reliable against the AI, but they are not impossible to dodge. It's really funny that after 4, homing weapons like homing missiles have been made far more accurate to the point of being undodgeable, so now we're swinging to the opposite side of the pendulum after 3 and 4. While we're on the subject of weapons, the weapon list in Twisted Metal 4 is certainly quite expansive, but as with Twisted Metal 1, quality versus quantity, we have some more useful weapons at our disposal, and a couple of new ones, but there's also a bunch of filler weapons. Some of it is largely due to the way they were designed. The intent was there, and it's genuine, but the actual execution is lacking. Of the weapons in this game, homing missiles, power missiles, remote bombs, proximity mines, freeze remotes, and napalms and mortars are good to great weapons. Fire missiles, speed missiles, rain missiles, MIRVs, Rain 2s, and even all lobs to an extent are filler. I still use fire and speed missiles mainly to destroy objects, not damage enemies, unless they don't have anything else. Rain missiles continue their role from Twisted Metal 3 of being cool conceptually but useless. MIRV and Rain 2s are hampered by their design. They shoot a missile that goes diagonally towards the sky, while releasing homing missiles or fireballs that track an enemy and are meant to do good damage. The problem with them is that the missiles or fireballs are not given enough time to properly track their targets, since the angle that they get released at from the primary missile is too low to let them home in on the target. What you'll often get is that the missiles or fireballs from the MIRVs or Rain 2s end up hitting the ground near an enemy rather than at the enemy. You'd figure that maybe shooting the MIRV or Rain 2 at an elevated height would help, but the primary missile from those weapons also has a vertical limit. It will not go past a certain height, and that will prematurely detonate the missile and ruin the whole point of using them. It says a lot that the mods for Twisted Metal 4 adjust the MIRV and Rain 2 to make the launch angles for missiles or fireballs make sense, so that they have time to actually track the enemy and make it towards them instead of hitting the ground near them, and they become more useful as intended without needing to alter their damage too much, although the mods would still buff their damage nonetheless. So sadly, vanilla Twisted Metal 4 makes MIRVs and Rain 2s complete filler weapons. All lobs are a big whammy, and they are very powerful, but the mortars that get released from the primary missile have so much knockback, which limits its overall effectiveness and it's more situational of a weapon. Things like only certain vehicles will be able to take the full brunt of the auto lob, like Moon Buggy, or certain vehicles like Orbital and Zombie can make full use of it thanks to their specials holding enemies in place, or having an enemy near a wall to hopefully minimize the knockback from pushing them away from all the mortars so that more of it can land. Again, like with MIRVs and Rain 2s, the intent behind the auto lob is genuine, but the execution clashes with the intent. The mods make some interesting adjustments to all lobs, but overall the most I can say is that they're more useful than MIRV and Rain 2 and vanilla Twisted Metal 4. So it's a filler weapon, but to a smaller extent. I haven't mentioned ricochet bombs, but I don't have any strong opinions about them. In 3, they were helpful to juggle cars since there was no aerial movement, so it locks them in place without them being able to turbo away or move away, with the only real issue being that you're limited to 3, which is weird in the case of the ricochets not being very strong, and enemy vehicles not having any access to ricochet bombs. You can also ram an enemy with a ricochet bomb in hopes of launching them into a Tokyo Fan or the Blimp Pit for an instant death. In TM4, other than retaining their usual property of being able to bounce off of walls and stay out on the field for a while, ricochets just are another weapon. So of the large weapon list in 4, about a third of them are mostly filler, and some of them really needed the mods to make them more useful. If you're going to have a large weapon list in the context of a car combat game, then Black and 2012 are much better examples of having a big weapon list, with every weapon having use and little to no filler. But that being said, there is one pretty neat thing about Twisted Metal 4 that's unique to that game, which is that weapons don't have a prep time when you switch to them initially, allowing you to fire them the instant the inventory highlights them. You can rapidly fire weapons one after the other by firing, switching, firing the next weapon immediately after switching, and so on. This is one of the few ways to really do huge damage in this game, especially with vehicles that have specials that immobilize enemies in order to make it difficult for them to escape the onslaught, like Orbital and Trash Man. Continuing on from weapons, energy moves have been greatly expanded on from Twisted Metal 3, with a list that rivals Twisted Metal 2's. Clearly, having more development time and all the feedback from 3 made a huge difference. The all-important shield has returned, with invisibility still retaining its role in reducing enemy aggression from 3, and the overall duration on things like frozen states and shields is longer compared to 2 or 3, presumably to up the ante compared to those games. Rear attack has been nerfed, with it requiring slightly more energy compared to 3, but with the rear attack infinite weapon glitch, it may have been for the best. Enemies will make use of all the energy moves that were available in 3, as well as shields, plus the hyperspace only if they're in a falling to their death situation. Unlike health, I am fine with enemies making use of more energy moves as a means of making them difficult. I still dislike the fact that enemy regeneration from 3 remains a thing in 4. The levels may no longer say enemy regeneration activated, but you can clearly see that all enemies don't spawn on the map, since the on-field enemies don't match the actual enemy count. Construction Yard, for instance, has 3 enemies, but only 2 of them show up. I think this one is understandable, at least with the crane weapon in mind, since it would be easier to use it when you don't have too many enemies to distract you from utilizing it. But every level after Construction Yard doesn't really have anything to explain why they can't load all the enemies into level, especially if it's a smaller enemy count, like 4 enemies total. Combine the fact that every level features a boss, and this results in tournament mode playthroughs feeling dragged out, especially if not abusing things like lightning rear attack spam or proximity mine teleporter launches. With the exception of Microblast, every one of my Twisted Metal 4 playthroughs has been under half an hour, thanks to cranking the read and seek speedups on Duck Station to maximum in order to greatly reduce the load times. Without it, I'd probably be looking at normal playthroughs that are closer to 40 minutes. Vanilla TM4 has really poor pacing without using certain tricks. The mods making the overall pacing much better with revamped weapons or adjusting things like all enemies actually spawning in or removing the amount of bosses is also not another point in Vanilla Twisted Metal 4's flavor. As opposed to Twisted Metal 3, where I was mostly indifferent to the levels in that game, here in 4 I at least like 2 of the levels, namely Road Rage and Oil Rig. I remain indifferent to the other levels. Minions Maze would probably be a hated level just for its layout, but the lightning rear attack spam helps make it more tolerable at best. I think the only issue I have with these levels, which would honestly fall under more of a nitpick than an actual flaw, is that there's no real theme to them. Twisted Metal 1 had areas set to LA with realistic backdrops like highways, suburbs, and rooftops. 2 and 3 and Head On had a world tour theme. Black returns to realistic backdrops set to a midtown. Small Brawl is kid-based environments like a playground, treetop, kitchen, living room. And 2012 had large-scale environments with cities and canyons and amusement parks. 4 just doesn't have any kind of theme to unite the different environments. You have a scrapyard, a futuristic city, a highway, a bedroom, an ancient level, a roof, a maze, and a carnival. It feels like 989 just did whatever because their focus was more on trying to exercise far more creativity and imagination in design than what they did for Twisted Metal 3. The only level that makes sense in this game is Sweet Tooth's Carnival, given the new backstory to Twisted Metal, as well as the fact that Sweet Tooth is now the host of the tournament. If I were to come up with my own conglomerate of Twisted Metal 4 levels, it would be themed more around entertainment and attractions like a carnival, as with Twisted Metal 4 initially, or right in the game as of now, amusement theme park, a spooky horror themed map, a rooftop level that uses a roller coaster, or some kind of high aerial based thing like a Ferris wheel, a stadium, that sort of thing. There's nothing wrong with trying to make the best car combat level you could possibly make in the absence of any kind of theme or concept, but I figured Sweet Tooth as a host would have far more memorable places for his contestants to fight in. The cast of characters and vehicles is the largest of any Twisted Metal game, and that's not even getting into the custom cars that can add a few additional ones for gameplay purposes. However, in terms of gameplay, there's a glaring issue. Specifically, there are multiple vehicles that have similar specials, but one vehicle might just be a clear upgrade over another vehicle, and that to the point that there isn't really much reason to play as that vehicle. For instance, Drag Queen is one of the worst vehicles in the game. It has terrible handling, good speed, and a flamethrower special isn't strong. Then you have Super Dumper, who has way better handling, more speed overall, and his special is 2 flamethrowers to Drag Queen's 1. Sure, he's a boss character, but he's such an obvious upgrade over Drag Queen that there's really not much reason to play as Drag Queen, even for variety's sake, if you absolutely need someone who can torch somebody. You can also throw in Goggle Eyes as another vehicle that is essentially a flamethrower user. Then we have 4 construction or maintenance type vehicles with a grab special. One of them is a boss character and that is original to Twisted Metal 4, but with the lack of an actual driver behind it, it feels arbitrary to make Crusher a boss vehicle when there's nothing particularly special about it. We have a lot of boss characters in this game, but some of them being super versions of an existing vehicle is not particularly inspired. Bosses should be fewer in number overall, unique, and have good reasons for why they should be a boss character instead of an ordinary one. Sweet Tooth being the host of the Twisted Metal tournament in 4 is a good reason for making him, an existing character, into a boss, and a final boss at that. Never mind Sweet Tooth being the overall mascot for the series. Axel, Dumper, Slam, and Augur don't really have any particular reason to be made into boss characters. Some mods of TM4 have focused on converting boss vehicles into regular ones, or reducing the amount of bosses you face throughout tournament mode, which are good calls. It has been confirmed that the bosses being playable were a last minute thing, which means 989 couldn't prepare bios, endings, voice actors, or even vehicle stats or drivers for them, except for Sweet Tooth, though it's still a waste to have no actual driver or character behind the boss vehicles. Not even Sweet Tooth, as mentioned before, has one. One big criticism of 2012 is the vehicles not having unique individual drivers for them. 4 not having unique drivers for the boss vehicles is practically small potatoes in comparison. One thing I did like about Twisted Metal 4 is that it's the first in a series to properly feature substantial and permanent unlockables, with the ability to save your games so that these remain unlockable every time you boot up the game, and it has several unlockable characters and levels. I greatly appreciate that, as it adds replay value, and my personal preference, as I would always bring up, is that I play Twisted Metal for single player for multiple replay value, and unlockables and secrets adds to that, though I'm more ambivalent to the fact that in 4, unlocking the characters and levels is as simple as going through and beating each level of tournament mode once. While it does mean that you only need one tournament playthrough to unlock everything of note, it's too simple of an unlock process. I'd have preferred more varied unlock methods, such as completing a game with certain characters, or beating the game a number of times, or playing through deathmatch in a specific way. As I have stated and will repeat once I get to my Twisted Metal Black Dots, the black/small brawl style of unlocking is my preferred process. There's exploration, interactivity, and needing to beat the game in a certain way to get those unlockables, which will take time, but it feels far more rewarding for your time investment. At least every Twisted Metal game since 4 would also feature unlockable characters, and every game would have unlockable levels except for 2012. So good on Twisted Metal 4 for setting the precedent. I also like that Twisted Metal 4 eases you into the gameplay. There is no difficulty selector like in the other Twisted Metal games. Instead, you acquire rankings in tournament mode, which will gradually adjust the AI to become more difficult. Early on, they're more passive, they rarely attack, and they won't go after health pickups. Eventually, with the higher rankings, they'll gradually gain these behaviors and become their most difficult selves on Immortal ranking, the highest ranking you can get. It takes multiple playthroughs of tournament mode to get to this rank, as a fresh full playthrough only ends you with on gladiator ranking at highest. Plus, you also get 4 lives for a full tournament playthrough as opposed to 3 in all others minus 2012, giving you a bit of leniency. 4 also is the only TM game where you can jump into another tournament playthrough after beating the game and viewing a character's ending, as opposed to going back to menu and having to initiate a tournament playthrough from there. This is essentially necessary to get to those higher rankings for tournament mode. That being said, Twisted Metal 4 is not too hard of a game once you abuse various tricks and exploit the enemy's aggression, even on the higher rankings. Unfortunately, like TM3, you cannot skip your character's ending movie when you complete a run with them. Given all the other quality of life changes made from 3 to 4, you'd figured something like that would have been an obvious one, especially for the sake of going through tournament mode to quickly ascend in ranking to get to Immortal. Twisted Metal 4 is also the last Twisted Metal game to feature passwords to skip straight to specific levels, even with the ability to save games starting from here. It also goes back to the Twisted Metal 1 system of having just one password for a level, rather than a huge set of character-specific passwords. I miss having level passwords. Sometimes it's nice to go for a heavily cut down game time and skip straight to my desired level. After playing Twisted Metal 4 in its entirety, I give it a 7 out of 10. There's a lot of nitpicks I have and some glaring flaws, but overall it's a more enjoyable experience than 3, even if the pacing is worse and some questionable decisions are made. And if nothing else, then the mods for Twisted Metal 4 help make it an even more enjoyable experience over vanilla Twisted Metal 4, so I have a better reason to go back to it. That's the gameplay and commentary. Hope you enjoyed it, and Insanity is out.